And welcome back, everybody, to the Podcaster Nation. My name's Rory Paquette. I am your host. I love you guys. I love this job. I love this podcast. Thank you for joining us today. This is the podcast, everybody, that the rising tide raises all ships. This is the podcast that is about podcasters. It's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. And you guessed it, my guest today is, wait for it, a podcaster. That's right, a unique podcaster. I'm excited about this episode. I love seeing stuff that's different, and I love seeing stuff that is successful and different. And this really qualifies. You guys are going to get a kick out of this today. Just in the pre-interview alone, I heard like 5 things that made me stop and go, "Wait, I'm sorry. Excuse me. What?" And you're going to get to hear about all those as we move forward. Please welcome to the show the host of Tracing the Path podcast, Dan R. Morris. Dan, how you doing?
I was hoping there was going to be like applause.
I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
add that later in editing
Yeah.
for you. But how you doing? I appreciate you joining us this morning.
I'm pretty good. I'm a little bit happy that it's not super cold outside.
All right. And you said you were in like Tennessee, right?
Yeah, which is weird because it's supposed to be, temperate all year.
Mm-hmm.
But yesterday I walked the dog, it was 28.
That's cold
28's
for you?
not temperate. 28's you can see your breath. Like that's that's, that's not good.
The guy who's in the podcast that got released today, Steve, lives out in Idaho. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
he's feeling your pain right now because he's got like 2 degrees, I think, this
Let me
morning.
tell you something about Idaho. If you listen to yesterday's podcast, then you'll appreciate this. When I think of Idaho, I think of evergreen trees. I think of mountains, I think of lakes, I think of beauty. But when you fly into Boise, unbeknownst to you and anyone else on the planet, you're landing in a desert. A desert. There's no evergreen trees. It's not beautiful. It's the desert.
Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate
I
it.
I was very sad when we
Oh,
landed. When my plane was coming in, I was like, where are, what's happening?
all right. So all of the mail I get from my Idaho listeners is going straight to you. I'm just
No,
gonna
no,
hit
no.
forward, send right
Boise
over to
people
you.
will laugh at that because
All
they
right.
know. I've told them, and they're like, "Oh yeah,
Boise people get it.
yes,
Okay. This sort of dry approach that you got going right now is like one of the things that makes your podcast entertaining to listen to. I got to
nice,
be
nice."
honest. I really do like it. Now, you had mentioned that your podcast was sort of inspired by Paul Harvey and some other folks.
Indeed, indeed.
Okay. Do you want to maybe start there and tell
Sure,
everybody,
sure.
who you are, why you're doing this, so on and so
Yeah.
forth?
All right. Well, first of all, Paul Harvey. He's probably the most famous radio guy out there. I mean, there's Rush Limbaugh. He's pretty big. And then Wolfman Jack back from the 60s. But otherwise, if you're talking about radio people, like Paul Harvey had a thing. And uh, when I lived in by the way, I'm a military brat, so I've lived in 17 states, I think, and then a couple of countries.
Okay.
So when I was in my 20s, my early 20s, I used to have a job where I was in the car quite a bit, and I would catch Paul Harvey's story around noon every day. And I'm going to say it's between 5 and 20 minutes long, depending on the day. Like sometimes it was just a news update, but sometimes it included the rest of the story, which was a tale that his son wrote, Paul Harvey Jr. and he would tell on the air. And the story was always about something that you were familiar with. And but it started out in an enigmatic way. For instance, he would talk about little Jack, and Jack grew up to be in the Navy, and then he was on a ship, and then on the ship he got into a boxing match on the deck, and he fell off into the water, and the ship had to turn around and go get him. And then so it's this crazy tale, and at the end he would say something like, "And that little Jack grew up to become John F. Kennedy. And now you know the rest
Yes.
of the story. So
Yeah.
every day I would listen to this, and I don't care if I was going to a meeting and I was late. I was not getting out of the car until that story ended. I was going to find out who this tale was about. Like every day, it had this wow feeling, like holy moly, that was awesome. Like that feeling. So as I got older and I ended up having kids, and I have 11 kids. I believe that's one of your wow moments from the pre-show.
I can't handle hearing it. That's just wow. At three, we were like, I've caught my limit. I can't keep track of them all anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
11 is wow.
So my wife and my wife's is Rachel Marie Martin. She's an author and she's got a giant Facebook page. Um, uh, we did a podcast called Amplify Today, which was, I guess at this point in time, it was kind of like a time capsule of social media in like 2013 to 2015 or something. There's like 230 episodes, and it's every cool little gadget that comes out in social media world in that period of time and then goes away. Like the Yo app, where all it does is say yo. And you send it to somebody and then they send it back and it also says yo. And like it was really big for a short period of time.
All
So
right.
anyway, so we did this podcast. And I could I got the kids to listen to it a couple of times, but it really got me thinking about this audio experience. And like, what is it that I would want my kids to have? And I thought back to that Paul Harvey moment, that you form the story in your mind, and then there's this like wow moment. And I realized that as they look at their phones, like they don't have this. They don't have this moment. And so now let me combine that with this other piece of knowledge that's floating around in my head. So when Paul Harvey was young, he used to listen to the radio himself. He would listen to these action adventure stories like The Shadow. Only the shadow knows what evil lurks inside the hearts of men. So, and he said at a conference once that he found it interesting that in all of these action and adventure stories he would listen to on the radio, the hero of the story always looked a little bit like him. And I thought, that is true for all of us. We listen to this story, we build this movie in our head. And because we're using our own head to create the story, that the action hero might look like us. Like sometimes there aren't other clues to give you what he looks like. Like we build that. Like we're part of the story. So I was thinking I wanted to give my kids that thing, and I couldn't necessarily find what I was looking for, and I just thought, I should do it. So I started with the Oregon Trail game. And the reason I started there is because they had a little bit of a fascination with computers and games, and I was telling you about the Oregon Trail once. And if you're not 51 years old like me, if you're not 49 or 52, then this is probably not true for you. But when I was a kid, the Oregon Trail computer game showed up in my classroom on a cart with an Apple IIc computer. And it was the first time in the history of the world that computers were in the classroom. Anybody older than me didn't experience this, and anybody younger than me had computers the entire time. So, to some degree, we are the Oregon Trail generation. So, I wanted to tell them like what that was like. I wanted that story to be like what that was like. So, in doing the research for it, I came across something that no one had ever talked about before. Um, and that was the idea that if it weren't for the Oregon Trail game, there would be no Apple computers. Steve Jobs would not have made it. And it took me a little bit to figure it out. Um, and when I put the story together and published the episode, it was a matter of 3 weeks before I got a phone call. I was at the pool with my wife, and the guy on the other end said, "Hi, my name is Dale of Friends. I wrote the Oregon Trail game." And I said, "Yeah, I know exactly who you are.
Wow.
Why are you calling me?" He says, "I just heard your episode, and it's the only time anyone has ever told the story of our game. Like most of the time, they just tell like how it was made at a college and stuff like that, but no one's ever told the full story before." And I said, "Well, dude, when I found this little tiny little tidbit of information and realized, wait a second, this piece of information is unbelievable. And this information is there's this company in Minnesota called MECC, MECC, and the state of Minnesota created this group. And this group just had teachers write computer games because Minnesota was like the the epicenter of computing at the time. Minneapolis. Um, it's like where IBM was, like everybody was in Minneapolis. So they ended up with a bunch of games just that they could play on these computers. And it was all like how to do math facts, they're all like that. But there was a couple of games, like real games like Oregon Trail, which really was a history game, but it was a game. So they were ordered to go to this computer fair in California because this group organized by the state of Minnesota said, we want to get a computer into every classroom. So, but we need to figure out what's the best computer. So they sent a few people to California. And Steve Jobs happened to have a booth at this computer fair. And the reason that he had a booth at the fair is that he had created a little computer that he knew would revolutionize the world. But he didn't know why people would buy it. He didn't know how to tell them why they needed it. No one ever had one before, a personal computer. Like there's no reason to get a computer at the time. And explaining it to people was very difficult because we didn't have it.
Right.
Well, these guys from MEC show up at his table and they say, look, we've got all these computer games that we want teachers to use. So what we need is a computer that has a disk drive that's separate from the computer that we can take from one computer to the other and transfer all of the software onto the computer. We could copy it on. And Steve's the only guy at the entire thing that had a peripheral drive you could plug into the computer, disk drive, only one. And so he started asking them about the computer games and realized in that moment that he could sell his computer to schools all over the country by just showing them the software. Like this is why they needed it, because the kids in the back of the room could be doing math facts while they're teaching something else. And so he got them computers and bundled the software together with Apple. And in the next year, they sold it to school systems all over the United States. And without that moment, Apple might not exist. Like there might have been another guy that figured out a way to sell it because prior to that, he had only sold like 95 computers. So I thought that was like a wow moment.
Yeah.
And I thought, all right, that's what the show is going to be, this wow moment. And so that just doing that made me be like, okay, this is fantastic. I bet you I can find more of these. And it ended up being that, I mean, I've done 62 now. And each one of them is something about the 20th century that just makes you say, wow, I had no idea. Like It's a Wonderful World by Louis Armstrong. How many people know that's really just Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star? Like, like nobody. So
I never even thought about that.
yeah, it's just Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, just rearranged.
Oh
They
my
knew
God,
at
it
the time.
is.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, my wife plays it and I sing it on the episode, which is ridiculous, but I
Wow.
wanted people to really see it. Um, so
All right.
anyway, I went through and I did the history of Paul Harvey. Here's crazy about Paul Harvey. In 19 when was Pearl Harbor? 43? 41.
41, I think.
December, yeah,
Yeah.
41. 1941, Paul Harvey's a news broadcaster in Kansas. He keeps watching all of these statistics that are coming across his screen, his whatever that teletype machine, and he keeps seeing the United States is sending military to Hawaii. Like he's seeing, but in reality, the United States is preparing for a potential like World War One or two. Like it's a chance. He thinks something is big going on. So he gets the newspaper and the radio station to sponsor him to go to Hawaii. And so for 9 months, he spends time in Hawaii trying to figure out what is going on here. What is this big thing? So on December 5th, 1941, he and his wife feel like they've turned over every stone. There's nothing here. It's time to go back. They board a ship. It takes 5 days to get to California. 2 days later, while in the middle of the ocean, Pearl Harbor is attacked.
Yeah.
And the ship has to zigzag to get all the way to California because they're afraid that it's going to be torpedoed.
Right.
So, like, that moment is a wow. But on top of that, did you know that Jackie Robinson was on that ship? Jackie Robinson was playing football in Hawaii. And he, too, got tired of being far from his mom. So he decided to leave and also got on the SS Sirloin in Honolulu on December 5th, 1941, and went back to California. So he, too, was on there while Pearl Harbor was.
Yeah. They
So
both
anyway,
just missed it. Wow.
like just those kinds of moments that just make you go, wow, I had no idea. So that's what I've been doing.
And so that's the podcast then, is a series of wow
Yeah.
moments.
Yeah. And do you think my kids listen to it? No.
Well, don't take that personal. I've, I've put out over 300 episodes between my various podcasts. I think my kids listen to one because I made them.
Yeah. This is exactly what happens.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, now you have 4 times as many kids as I do. So, your odds are a little better, but still.
Yeah. None
But
of them.
I mean, when I listened to your episode, I listened to one about French Lick, Indiana. Of
Oh,
course, I chose
Bloody
one from your
Marys.
home state. And through the whole episode, I'm going, is this guy just a historian, or is he actually doing all of this research? I mean,
Yeah.
you, this sounds like you do a ton of research per episode.
I feel like because it's not my primary job, it takes about 2 weeks to put together an episode. But the
Wow.
crazy part is the research is part of it. It's the putting together the story. That's the time that, every single month I write a 30-page story, which by hand, because I'm a paper guy. I don't really type things out. So yeah,
Right.
every month I write 30 pages, and then it has to have arcs, and I have to
Yeah.
try to get you to this moment, like, wow, I had no idea that happened.
Yeah, I mean, you're not just spitting facts. It's not like a history class either. You're spinning a story. You've got music. I mean,
Yep.
the plot line, the story goes up, and everything else, and you're like, whoa, wait, what? And I knew when I listened to it that you were a Paul Harvey, disciple, so to speak.
Oh,
And I was very familiar with Paul Harvey. I used to use his rest of the story in, a lot of my marketing and stuff back in the day.
nice, nice.
But because my name's Rory, so it was call Rory for the
Hmm.
rest of the story type
Oh
of
yeah, yeah,
scenario.
that's good. That's good.
But I'm dating myself because I am actually older than you and grew up without a computer in a classroom.
Oh, you're
So
from the 1900s as well.
pretty
Nice.
much, yeah. Especially again, if you ask my kids, they remind me that all the time.
Yes. I really
But
like to tell people I'm from the 1900s.
they tell me so. I got you. Now you've put out. You said 62 of these episodes. There's only
Mhm.
56 showing. I think there's a story there too. Maybe we should cover that real quick in case people look at that and get confused.
So this is probably a story for the podcasters.
Okay.
I have spent about 20 years writing a book. Now, I didn't know I was writing a book, or maybe I did. I probably did. I didn't know that it was going to be a podcast. Maybe I should say it that way. And I decided that I would turn this 20 years of research and notes and stuff into episodes. Uh, but it dawned on me afterward that the audience that listens to Tracing the Path and the audience that was going to listen to this story that I wrote, probably not the same. So I deleted them. So the podcast app will tell you that there's 56 episodes, but if you listen to it, I'll be telling you, welcome to the 62nd episode kind of thing. So I deleted it because I believed it needed its own show. Like it needed its own thing away from Tracing the Path so that I could market it separately. And the story is Santa Claus. And so I put out this 5-episode, 5-hour story of Santa Claus. Now, knowing what I've already said about what I like to do, it's the same. Like I'm telling the same story that I did with the Oregon Trail and with, well, with Paul Harvey. I've decided that if, and I'm actually, it's going to be a real podcast and a book and stuff like this year. Finally, it's going to be like a real thing. So I decided, what if, well, let me say this. First of all, I'm a huge Santa Claus fan. And I like the idea. And if you remember back to 1899, when Virginia wrote the editorial to the New York Sun, "Is Santa Claus real?" And then, what comes back is, "Yes, Virginia, Santa Claus is real." So that concept to me, and even in the movie The Polar Express, that he will tell you, Santa Claus tells him at the end that, I am what you think of with Christmas. Like I am the feeling, the spirit that you have. Well, if you think about every Christmas you've ever experienced, that feeling, that spirit, that whatever changes the way we are in December, that exists every year. Like you can't say that doesn't exist. It exists.
Yeah.
But what if that feeling is Santa Claus? What if Santa Claus, the picture that we see, is just the embodiment of that feeling? Now, I decided to write a non-fiction story about Santa by starting with Saint Nicholas back in Myra, Turkey, who was one of the signers of the Nicene Creed, who became Saint Nicholas, the patron saint of children, who started the actual concept of giving, gifts to kids every year. Like there was an actual man, and he was a real, he's a real church guy, and everything was real about him. Well, I decided to think, what if every story that's ever been told about Santa Claus is really just some of the details of his life? It's all real. Like, what if everything you've ever seen is just part of his life? And in the Santa Claus with Tim Allen, they say if you get into a suit, you become the Santa Claus. Like all of a sudden you're the new Santa. I'm like, oh, so what if there are multiples over the years and they're all Santa? And everybody has written a story, like Mark Twain and C.S. Lewis, and like all these famous people have written Santa Claus stories. So I decided I would read every single one of them. I would research them and I would put them all in chronological order, and I would make the life of Santa Claus, the real life. Like he looked down one time and saw a greenhouse and went down and he saved Frosty. Like that was just a moment of his life. He saw there was somebody in trouble, a rabbit, and he's like, "Hey, what's wrong?" And she's like, "Well, Frosty's, he melted in the greenhouse." Like, everything is just part of his life.
Sure.
So I told the story, and people loved it. They really loved it. It got a lot of play. But then in the middle of the year, the next year, I wanted to update it, and I realized, wait a second, maybe it needs to be its own thing. maybe I need to make sure that for the Tracing the Path audience, that I don't go too far out. I don't want anybody to unsubscribe because it's all of a sudden kind of different, or it's not exactly what they were looking for, or they're, you know,
Sure, sure.
making a Santa Claus story in nonfiction is, that's out there. It's interesting, but it's not exactly like 20th century history. So it's its own thing now. And this year it's going to be
Wow.
6 episodes and a book and all the other stuff. So, but Tracing the Path is still there. It just is missing a November and a December of like 3 years ago or something.
Okay. The thing that keeps coursing through my head, because you and I talked briefly, I know that you've had a chance to monetize some things. We'll get to that, towards the,
Yeah.
further on the podcast when we're talking about podcasting stuff. But um, as I'm listening to all this, and I'm thinking about, 2 weeks worth of research and everything else, and now this with Santa Claus and learning everything that you're learning, and why? I mean, what is it about this that is driving you to do this? Because you clearly just love it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's my
Yeah,
favorite thing to do.
no kidding.
Is if I could only do this. In fact, I spent the last year trying to make my wife famous so that her income could fill the gaps where my income is, and I could just focus on the podcast. Like if I could only do that, that would be the greatest life ever.
I mean, this is 100%, it is the greatest life ever, let me just tell you. But
Yeah.
this is your, I mean, passion project then. Because I mean,
Oh
the
yeah.
only reason anybody would do everything you're doing and put this kind of heart and soul into something is if it was your vision quest, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't
Wow.
even want to make it better so that I could get better paying clients. Like I don't want that. I want to make it better because I want there to be some sort of awesome stories out there that no one else is telling.
Right.
Like no one else is telling these stories.
No, I've never come across a podcast like yours, to be
Nice.
honest. And so when I heard it and I started looking at all the other episodes, I was like, this is fascinating. I need to know more. I had to listen, and the whole bit. So, um, that,
Now for a little
wow.
podcaster tip,
Yeah.
um, my wife and I also own a company called Audience Industries, and we do digital marketing workshops around the world. We teach people how to turn their digital marketing hobby into a career because that's what we've done since 2013.
Nice.
Well, we did 2 tours of New Zealand, 7 cities each time. Uh, and one of them, I met this lady. She drove us around, and she was playing like little bits of podcasts that she liked. It was like she was just sharing stuff. I don't know why. She was sharing it. And one of them had uh, different different vignettes inside the podcast. And I was like, wait a second. You could do 2 different things in a podcast. I never really thought about that before. Like, a lot of people interview and they just do the interview, right? Well, this lady that we were listening to would interview a person, and then she would say, okay, I'm going to time you in 1 minute. I want you to explain what you do to the audience, but you're not allowed to repeat a word unless it was like the, this, like she could repeat those. So every single time, every guest, she said, you're going to have to explain what you do, but you're not allowed to repeat a word. And I was like, ooh, that's kind of fun, a little interesting. It's got timers laughing. And I was like, oh, that is interesting. So I thought, okay, what could I do with Tracing the Path? Like, how could I shake it up a little bit, like add a little something? And I came back, and that's when I added at the end of every episode is let's see what tails hit the cutting room floor. And then I would just tell some of the facts that I found in the research that didn't fit the story, but were cool, just cool facts. And now some people tell me they listen just for that. And I was like, that is exactly what I did with Paul Harvey. I just wanted to hear the end.
Yep. The rest of the story.
So, yeah, so think about that if you're a podcaster. Like, you're allowed to have more than one straight concept. You could do something else in the middle of it. You could tell a little story while your guest is there. In fact, if you ever listen to or watch Graham Norton, who's like the Jimmy Kimmel of the UK, he's like the coolest guy.
No.
Uh, he has the biggest stars on a couch, and he interviews them like any other talk show host. But sometimes on the TV, he'll just put funny dog pictures, and they all laugh at the different ones, and they talk about their little dog stories, and has nothing to do with anything, but it's just like a different little thing that happens during his show. So you're definitely not bound
Yeah.
to just the interview or just the story. You could do something else on your show.
Is that the guy with the big red couch behind him that everybody's
Yeah,
sitting on? Okay, I have
yeah,
seen clips of him on social media. I just didn't
yeah.
realize what
He's
his name
great.
was. Yeah, actually a very entertaining show when you see the clips like that. So,
Yeah.
wow. Okay, I guess I haven't. I didn't even know it. I'm learning already as I'm just sitting here talking to you. I'm getting smarter. um, okay, so I mean that covers your why. You just absolutely love this. The How do you decide where you're going to go, what you're going to look into, what you're going to research? Because I mean, some of this stuff, like the Indiana one, what led you there
I
to
actually
tell that
went.
story?
I actually went to Indiana. I went to this hotel that we talk about with the giant dome. Uh, and they told me that that was where the Bloody Mary was invented. And I was like, what? How is that a thing? And then I just started researching it. I will say that I have a list of about 370 topics that either pop into my head or I see something online. And actually, underneath my computer that's holding up right now is a book I just got yesterday called 50 Plants That Changed the Course of History.
Okay,
And I was like, plants? Interesting.
there he goes.
So I'm going to read through the book. I'm going to take a couple of notes, and then this is what happens.
I
I
see.
start researching, and I'm looking. I am looking for the wow. Like, that is the hardest part. What is this moment that's going to make you say wow? And a lot of times, I just don't find it. I might take like 5, 6, 7 days just to research, finding every rabbit trail looking for something. And then it's just like, ah, crap. I mean, it's a good story, but I'm not a history podcast. There's got to be a wow. There's
Right.
got to be something that makes you go, whoa, I didn't know that.
There's got to be a rest of the story to it. Yeah,
It's got to be
absolutely.
something.
Absolutely.
Sometimes they just end and I can't find it. In fact, there's one right now that I really want to tell. I want to tell the one red paperclip story. Remember it was like the first internet viral thing where a guy trades a paperclip up to a house. He trades it for a pen and he trades the pen for
Yes.
a propane tank and
Yes.
works
They
his way
talked
up.
they talked about that in the office one time in a swap meeting
Yeah.
type deal. Yeah, exactly.
So I was involved with it back then. Like I was talking to the guys doing it. I was in the internet. I was doing things. And then Corbin Burnson got involved. He was an actor from LA Law and uh, oh another rock star from Arizona. I can't remember. But anyway, I've wanted to tell the story, but I haven't found the wow. But inside of that story, Corbin Burnson buys or trades a role in a movie for a snow globe, a Kiss, the rock band Kiss themed snow globe. So in my mind, okay, I've got snow globes and the one red clip paper clip. That's where they cross. That could be my moment. There always has to be like two things that cross to make the moment because I trace the path of the things till they get to that moment that makes you say, wow, like I trace the path of Mech, Minnesota company, and Steve Jobs until they meet. And then it's like, whoa, that's awesome. But
Wow.
in researching snow globes and in researching the paper clips and just the paperclip project in Tennessee, where they saved paper clips for every Holocaust victim, and then paperclip was invented in Norway, like all the stuff, and I just haven't. It just ends up being like a waste of time. Um, but it's there, and then I just started reaching the next one, and then finally, like this month, um, I finally just stumble upon something that makes me go, "Wow, that is awesome!" I had no idea that Cheetos were born from World War II. Cheetos. Like, whoa, that is cool.
All right.
Cheetos were a World War II product. And I was like, get out.
Had no idea.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, I gotta do that. So that's what I did this month.
So
And it
you
wasn't on my list of 371. It was just something I saw and I was like, ooh, that is cool.
so are you keeping like a journal of this stuff as it just sort of flows in and out of your life and in and out of your mind?
I
And you
have
anything
a
cool you write it down?
yes, anything cool I write down. I add to the spreadsheet. I have three spreadsheets. One is ideas. One is all the episodes I've already done. And then one is all of the things that were introduced in an episode that probably could have their own episode. And then sometimes I just write down a little note because I'm thinking that maybe this note will show up someday. Like Mary Steenburgen, actor, she's in all kinds of stuff. She was the mom in Elf. She was discovered by Jack Nicholson uh when she was in a waiting room of something at Paramount and he saw her and it was like, here. She wasn't even there to act. He was like, here, read this script, come in this room. And he discovered her. So I would just write that note down. I'm like, oh, okay, Steve, Jack Nicholson and Mary Steenburgen. Maybe that will be useful someday. Maybe not today, but maybe someday.
Interesting. Okay. That's cool too. I mean, the behind the scenes part of this. So you have like it's like guys who hang on to that piece of wood for 15 years thinking they might use
Yes.
it someplace, right?
Yeah.
And you've got all these little tidbits that you've picked up and at some point you start connecting dots.
Yeah.
Wow.
If I get two tidbits about the same person, place, company, product, or event, then I think, okay, maybe there's something to this.
And
Maybe there's
somehow you
something
do
to
all
this.
this work and you're able to put out your podcast. Is it every week?
I do once a month.
Once a month. Okay. That
Yeah.
that makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here
I would
going,
like to go to twice a month, but
wow,
it definitely means, I mean, when you've got a lot of kids, there's a lot going on besides work.
goodness. Yeah.
So, and if you love the kids and you like be in part of their lives, like, you know,
If you love
going to every single football game that my kid plays in, and then he doesn't actually get to play, that's
you still got
that's
to
a
be there though.
commitment.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
That's
I
watching everyone
understand.
else's kids play and cheer for your son on the sideline. That's something.
Right.
But it's hard to do research when you're doing that. So I need to thin out my life a little bit in order to improve the numbers or increase the numbers.
That's cool. I was going to ask you if that impacts, your downloads at all that you've seen coming out with that kind of frequency because it's not I mean it's not mainstream obviously. Everybody comes in tries to go once a week. But I've never really
Yeah,
looked
they
at what
do.
the parameters would be for someone who came out once a month. I mean, that's almost like a feature show every month.
I don't have any knowledge of if it impacts the numbers because I haven't
Uh,
done it a different way. So to
okay.
tell you, it changed. But I do have a lot of podcast clients, and then some of them do well every day, some do well every week, some do well every other week. The only thing that I would say does is the law is consistency is the law. Uh, because the people who do every week and then they stop doing it for a little bit and then they keep doing it every week, it disrupts everything.
Right.
It doesn't work. So, but people do tell me on Twitter and stuff all month, is it coming out today? Like they ask. So I know they like the idea that they get this cool story once a month, but I would love to tell too. But man, oh man, I got a lot going on.
Yeah. I mean, 11 kids is I mean, I could not keep up with that. There's no way in the world I could. I
Oh, it's
had
rough,
everything I
dude.
could with three kids and my wife was a stay-at-home mom.
Oh yeah. Although
So
three is the perfect number, by the way.
I thought it was. When I hit three, I'm like, okay, now we're at a table of five when we go out to eat. Okay, which means it's
Yeah.
going to take 45 minutes. You know, I,
Well,
I only have two
six.
hands. I can't grab one. It's like, come on.
Once you have four, then you got to get a new car. Like everything changes.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
At three, I could still manage it, but I didn't have
Yeah,
to
yeah,
like,
yeah.
go to the minivan and everything else or the Suburban,
And with
that
three,
thing.
even when someone's having a sleepover at someone else's house, the two of the others can still play together, which means you're not in the entertainment business.
Hey, there you
If you
go.
have one kid or two kids, you're in the entertainment business a lot.
Yeah, true.
So,
Very,
yeah.
very true. Insights on kids. I tell you what, the whole Santa Claus thing sounds like it could be one of your episodes. Like the lost episodes of
So the
Tracy and
Santa
the
Claus
Path,
thing,
right? I mean, where'd those 6 episodes go? Oh, they became Santa Claus. And Santa
Yes.
Claus turns into this, and your paths are crossing, and you're off and running. Sounds like you could make an episode out of the making of the Santa Claus thing.
Oh yeah, that's probably true. Although what really sucks is that every year there's another Santa Claus movie, and then I got to go in and like change everything.
This is
Like,
true.
oh,
Yeah.
hmm, this is what he did. But that
Well,
I think is my $1 million idea. I just uh the Santa Claus story I think is my $1 million idea.
I am looking forward to seeing that come out. I'll be looking for that, man. Please send me a
Nice.
link to that when
Nice.
that happens. Send it through Messenger because I really want to check that out. Let's talk a little podcasting action over
Okay,
here
let's do it.
because you said that you didn't see yourself going into podcasting necessarily, at the beginning. What made you choose podcasting as the medium for telling all these stories, as opposed to doing it on, say, YouTube or on the radio or some other way, like in a book?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So we did Amplify today. We were back in 2015 or 13 or whenever we did that. Uh, Podcasting was somewhat newer,
Yeah.
and we were looking for the edge from a company standpoint. We were looking for how do we be on the forefront? How do we do this thing? And my wife and I have a really good rapport, so that show did really, really well. Uh, and then I never thought of another medium other than podcasting for Tracing the Path. I wanted to do this thing and tell these stories for the kids. I knew that I could do Tracing the Path. I knew how to do a podcast. Like I didn't, that was no longer a barrier to entry. The idea that it would be on radio is like a dream. Like, in fact, I started by making them 22 minutes because I thought 22 minutes plus 8 minutes of commercials, that makes a 30-minute show on TV. Like, if somebody likes it, maybe it could become a TV show or become a radio slot. That was my original thought. But the idea of going to radio, there's a learning curve there. Like, how would I do that? Like, who would I start with? Or where would I even go, in all things. And I think this is probably the biggest problem we have as podcasters is that we always take the path that's easiest for us. Always. Um, it would be great for everybody to have merch, but that means you have to learn Shopify. And instead, people will just use Redbubble or Cafe Press. They'll just load, put their logo up on Teespring, and then they'll have shirts over there, but not on their own site. It'll be like a link to someone else's site because it's so simple to go over there, upload a logo, and all of a sudden you could sell a shirt. For a while, I used a Gmail address because I didn't know how to make a domain email. And Gmail, Dan Armour's at Gmail. How simple is that? Like that sounds kind of professional. No, no, it doesn't. But when you're taking the easiest path, you tell yourself it does. Uh, and I think that's probably one of our biggest downfalls is that we always go for the thing that we know. Like maybe I would have been much smarter to do this on the radio. Maybe if I really would have gone after NPR and said, could I do a show and then sent them samples and, you know, maybe could it be 5 times as big? I'll never know. I'll never know that. But I didn't do that because there were barriers to entry there. Uh, Sometimes taking the easiest path, I think it obviously creates action. We do things, we get things done. But maybe we don't always get the best things done. Sometimes I think it's much smarter to figure out what the dream would be and then figure out who do I need to become in order to get to that dream? Like what do I need to learn in order to get there instead of doing all the stuff I already know how to do. And then in the end, it's something that resembles the dream, but it's not quite the same.
I love that. That was a great answer. Thank you for
So,
for that because I've never heard that way. Um, wow. Okay, when you made the decision to go podcasting, how'd you get started? I mean, I know you had a podcast before, so did you already have the equipment? It was like a no-brainer, just slide right in, or did you end up having get a board and all kinds of fun stuff?
Oh, so that brings up a memory I haven't had for a long time. We went to CES, the largest electronics show in the world, in Vegas, which is like walking around 64 football fields, I believe they said. 64 football fields.
Wow.
Nobody
Yeah.
told me this before I went. Like, I didn't pack a lunch or something. So anyway, there were lots of, this was back in 2015 or something. There were a lot of companies that had booths with like phone screens, that would protect your screen, and they would be dropping bowling balls on them in front of you as you walk by to prove to you they had this greatest phone screen. And then there were these people that had all kinds of podcast apps. And and I remember distinctly, this is the first time I've had this memory pop up, but I remember this guy come up to me and he was like showing me his app. He said, "Yeah, you can do your whole podcast from your phone." I was like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, you can record on the phone. Here's like edit. Here's how you publish it. Here's how you send it." I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And so I think that might have been the day that Rachel and I decided we can do a podcast. You can even do it on your phone. Like we have a mic. I think we got snowball mics from Walmart or something. Um, and then we use the headphones, like just, the kind you
Yeah.
came with your Walkman in 1987.
Right.
Um, that was it. Then I found out that my Mac came with GarageBand, and I had to Google a couple things like, can you make a podcast on GarageBand? And then, there were several articles were like, yeah, it's easy. You just press record. And then,
Right.
and what we did at first, oh, this is painful. These are painful memories. What we did at first is my wife lived in Minnesota and I lived in Tennessee. So we would do our podcast on the phone, not Zoom. And what we would do is I would call her, and she also had a Mac. So she would press record on her GarageBand. I pressed record on my GarageBand. When she was done, she rendered it and emailed me her file. And then I put her file into my file, both tracks. I lined them up. Um, I think we clapped or something at the beginning, so we had like a common line. And that's
Wow.
how we did it at first. And then I would produce it on Libsyn. But that's how we did it at first when we were far away. Uh, and then, when we finally got into the same space, well, it got really easy then. But otherwise, I think just a series of, oh, yeah, we could do that. Which is funny. This brings up a totally different subject, but uh, I used to do triathlons. Um, I did, I probably did like 56 triathlons.
Wow.
Well, one day, my buddy Paul and I, training partner, we were in Wisconsin. We were doing a try, and a very large, overweight individual, more overweight than me. I got some tubby, I've eaten a lot of Oreos, so hangs over the belt a little bit. Well, this guy was a little bigger than me. He had an Iron Man triathlon tattoo on his ankle. This is exactly the same thing. I looked at Paul and I was like, dude, if that guy could do it, we could do it.
Right on.
So the same moment. So we did an Ironman. Uh, but it's kind of like when you see a guy doing a podcast on a phone, I'm like, oh, if that guy can do it on a phone, well, I could do it in my house. Like, how could it be?
Okay. I'm like, give me the conclusion because I have no idea where you're going right now with this Iron Man thing. But I
Yeah,
got it now. Yeah. Well, I mean, 11 kids, Iron Man's probably a good idea, man, because you got to stay, nimble.
yeah, yeah. Well, a few Oreos since then.
I see. I see. And yeah, that brought back a lot of memories for me. That app you were talking about where you could do it all, was that the old original Anchor app by any chance? I'm just
Oh,
guessing.
maybe, yeah,
Yeah, because I was around back then too doing it, and I just all the things you're saying, I'm like, Libsyn and all this. I'm going, oh wow, yeah, that's all that stuff is a blast from the past.
yeah,
But that's how you got started. That's awesome. It really is. As you've knocked that out, and as you've grown, I mean, obviously you're doing beautifully with the podcast. You've already passed the first three milestones, which is start 20
yep,
episodes and then 50
yep.
episodes, right?
Oh, yeah,
So you've passed those three already,
yep.
and your next stop is 100, which of course opens everything up. when that happens. But you're on your way with it. Was there any particular with this podcast? Was there any particular hardship or thing you kind of had to obstacle in your way towards getting this going, getting this dream of yours happening, or was it, hey, I'm giving myself a month, I got plenty of time, I know what I'm doing, and boom.
I've had two mental problems with the episode, with the podcast. One is I keep meeting audio engineers who know stuff, and I know I don't know stuff. And so the very early on, maybe episode 7 or 8, I asked an audio engineer friend if he could listen to it and tell me like what could I do to make it better audio wise? How do I fix it? And is it bad? And if that was the very first moment he asked me, and no one had ever asked me this, do you listen to it with headphones? And I'm like, no, I've never listened to it with headphones. If I listen to it, I just press play on the Mac and I just listen to it on computer speakers. And he goes, maybe you should listen to it with headphones. I was like, oh, all right. So then I heard a few things I'd never heard before. A couple, like, I tell a story, so I got to turn the page. So I heard like the page turn, and I was like, interesting. So then he asked me where I was recording it, and I told him, oh, maybe I was in here actually in my office. Uh, and he asked me about like my desk surface and my walls, and at this point, I didn't know that much. I mean, there were some obvious things, but I didn't know that much. So he told me to put a blanket on the floor because I got wood floors. And I was like, oh, all right, that's interesting. And finally, I came to the conclusion that I needed to actually record in the closet. I have a walk-in closet. It's got clothes everywhere. Uh, so I upped my audio game by recording in the closet and then using Ophonic, Auphonic, to somehow enhance the episode. So once I've recorded it, I actually go to Ophonic and I load it up, and then it does whatever audio engineering stuff it does.
Yeah.
It like makes it sound richer. I don't know. It does stuff. Uh,
Layman's terms, it does stuff. I love
it
that.
does
That's how,
stuff, yeah.
how we look at it. Yeah.
So that was awesome. And then the second thing, which I haven't learned yet, is the music. Um, it bothers me so much because I I try to come up with music that fits the episode. So,
Hmm.
if I did an episode on Twinkies and baseball, and so I had like Take Me Out to the Ball Game. But then I read in this forum once from all these audio people that then one person said, my biggest pet peeve is when people put music in and then the volume rises to where there's like a little break, and then the music fills the break, and then the volume decreases when the host comes back and then fades out. I was like, oh, that's a pet peeve. That's what I do. What I do is someone's pet peeve. Interesting. What does that mean? Like, what are the other options?
I mean, that's a pretty normal
So
thing you do with music
yeah,
in
so
your
I was
intro
like,
and outro.
so it bothers me still. Like I'll listen to an NPR podcast. NPR's got, I mean, they put a lot of money into it. So they got an entire crew, and
Right.
they've got like little sound effects, and they got clip clops of a horse walking. They got stuff happening in the background. I listen, I'm like, how do I get better at this? And then people will tell you about music beds, and I'm like, but it's different every week, like every month. Like I need different stuff. Like how am I going to do it? So still, I do a pretty good job, but I know it will be better at some point. Some
I was going to
point.
say, I heard clip clopping horses in that episode about French Lick, Indiana. I know you
Oh
inserted
yeah, it
that
might
in
have
there.
been.
Yeah.
Might have been.
So, I mean, you managed to steal that one pretty well. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I was impressed by that, actually. It's like he inserted sound effects. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, plus the music. So, I mean, it
Yeah.
was, it was impressive. How do you go about marketing your podcast?
Oh, this is my favorite tip. My bypass. This is gonna make the whole episode.
All right, here we go.
You're gonna love this. This is gonna be your favorite part. That's what I'm guessing. Um, I invented a concept called vested audiences. And typically, when I now speak at a conference or something, I speak on this topic. Vested audiences. Um, a vested audience is anyone who has a vested interest in what you're talking about. There are thousands of people who get paid to share your content. That is their job. They get paid to share your content with lots of people. The question is, who are these people and how do you find them? So this started with the Oregon Trail episode. Oh, no, it didn't. No, it didn't. It started with the history of pizza. I have a podcast about the history of pizza, and it goes back to Naples during the time of cholera, the cholera epidemic. Cholera was passed around because things were not clean. They didn't have good sanitation. People didn't wash their hands, all that stuff. Uh, well, pizza happened to be a fried dough, and local tomatoes were put on top of this fried dough. Well, it became common knowledge in Naples that if you ate the pizza, you didn't get sick. Not because it was fried, but that was just the knowledge. Like it was always safe. You could eat the pizza. Well, it was always safe because it was fried. Deep fried dough would kill any germs.
Sure.
So that's where I started. And then I thought, okay, you know what I should do? I should I should tell somebody in the cholera world about this podcast. Somebody will think it's cool. Well, I happen to already have been a Google Alerts user. I'm a huge fan of Google Alerts. I track my name and my wife's name. Anybody ever mentions them online, I want to know about it. So I decided I would track cholera. Well, that was way too many. I mean, it was like every day I get, 600 hits of cholera. It's just crazy. So then I did I think I did cholera and history. Anytime there was somebody mentioned the word history and cholera in the same paragraph or whatever, same web page. And I primarily I primarily track it on Twitter, primarily, but I do blogs and stuff too. You can tell, and I actually don't use Google Alerts. I use TalkWalker, which is a Google Alerts alternative. And that's because at one point in time, Google sent out this message that Google Alerts was no longer supported. So I thought, oh, well, one day it's going to die and it'll just go away. Well, here it is, still there 10 years later. So anyway, I use TalkWalker, which is free. So I decided, all right, I'm just going to tell it, look for cholera in history. So I found a tweet. Some lady was talking about, I don't know, cholera in history. And I sent her a note. I was like, well, on Twitter, I was like, hey, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but cholera is responsible for pizza. And then a link to the podcast episode. So a couple days later, I got a DM from her. And she said, I actually am a cholera historian. And this was the most amazing thing I'd ever heard. I'd like to put it in our newsletter to all of the cholera historians around the world. There's about 11,000. I was like, what? She was like, yeah, I'm going to put it in the newsletter. It's fantastic. And I was like, wait a second. You have a newsletter to cholera historians. You have to search the internet for content to put in this newsletter in order for it to be a newsletter. Like you have to find stuff every day or every week that would entertain your people, that would keep them opening it. Otherwise, your open rate will go down. People won't open it anymore. You are actually paid to share my episode. You are paid to share my episode. How can I find more of these people? So then I went to each episode and I started writing down everything that I had mentioned in the episode. If I mentioned, like in the Paul Harvey episode, it was his music teacher. Oh no, dramatic arts teacher that took him to the radio station because she thought he would be great on radio. as in high school. And I was like, dramatic arts teachers. Like the dramatic arts teacher is a hero in this story. There's got to be associations of dramatic arts teachers. I bet you there's like one in every state. These people would be interested in this episode. So I started going through them and I would write down there might be 20 things in every episode. If you remember the Indiana one, there's a bar in New York City, there's vodka, there's Smirnoff, there's like all of these things, all of these people might have an interest in sharing my episode because I talk about them. So I started tracking everything on Talkwalker. And anytime, and this became my morning coffee drinking hot chocolate moment. Every morning I go through my emails and I look for all the things where somebody is talking about something, and I think, oh, they might actually be interested in this episode. They are a Smirnoff vodka fan. Well, they'll love the story about how it started. That'd be cool. So that's what I've been doing, and in 5 years, I mean, it's paid off. I mean, Ripley's Believe It or Not actually found me that way. And when they heard the story that I told about Robert Ripley, the editor of Ripley's Believe It or Not emailed me and said, "We didn't even know this about Robert Ripley. We're going to make a cartoon and put it out, and it's going to tribute your podcast." Oh,
Wow,
that's
nice.
awesome.
Nice.
So then, you remember the Oregon Trail guy called me. The Robert Ripley people called me. Levi's called me. Now, here, you want to talk about monetization. When Levi's called me, they said, "Man, your story about Levi's is pretty fantastic. We haven't really had a story told like that." You know, that story ended up in the Holocaust, unfortunately for them, because it was more about the color blue is what the podcast was about, but it had a lot to do with Levi's. And then it ended up being, cyan is the like Latin word for blue, I guess. And your printer's got
Right, the
cyan.
printer.
Well, cyan is also the origin of cyanide. So that story kind of ended with the gas. Very sad. So anyway, that episode made me think, wait a second. If companies, what if I told, what if I told the story of companies? Would they pay me for that? So then I thought, all right, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my list. I'm going to look for some wow moments and I'm going to pitch companies to see if they would pay me to make the episode. Uh, and so far I've gotten three to do that. And they
Wow.
pay pretty well. Companies pay pretty well, by the way. Uh, and I tell the story however I want. That's kind of like the deal. I got to be able to tell it.
Right.
Uh, so I did McCann Erickson, which is now a different company, but McCann Erickson is this advertising company from the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and they made stuff that changed the world. There are a lot of the things that you know about are because of McCann Erickson. So I told that story. I got paid, and that's actually one of my favorite stories. It's actually ends uh, with the end of apartheid in South Africa. Uh, so I connect a company to the end of apartheid. How cool is that?
That's pretty cool.
Um, yeah, yeah. They helped Coca-Cola create this song. I'd like to teach the world to sing.
Hmm.
I'd like to I'd like to
Oh yeah,
share a Coke song
in
in the
perfect
70s.
harmony. Right. Yeah.
And I'd like to teach the world to
World to
sing
sing,
in perfect
perfect harmony.
harmony. I'd like to give the world a Coke. That was the thing.
Yep. And keep it
Um,
company. Yeah.
well, Coca-Cola actually tried to take the ad McCann Erickson made to South Africa, but the ad McCann Erickson made was like 300 people on a hillside in Italy singing the song, all drinking a Coke while they were videoing it, and they were people of all color and nationality. And when they brought it to South Africa said, "You can't play it here unless you take the black people out of the commercial." And Coke said, "Well, we're not going to do that." And South Africa said, "Well, you can't play it unless you do it." So Coke said, "We're going to leave South Africa." So they left. Like they gave all of their assets to black South Africans. Like, hey, you're gonna own this studio. We used to be ours. This potting plant, you're gonna own
Wow.
it. Yeah, they left. So that started this like domino effect of other companies leaving South Africa, which eventually led, to all this international, you know, uh, like pressure and then the fall of apartheid in South Africa. It's not a direct link, but
Right.
it's a like there's a link. It's a wow moment to me. So I thought, I want to do that. I'm going to see if I can sell episodes to companies, and I've been somewhat successful.
And
It's not a simple thing.
this all came from this vested audience
Yeah,
idea.
yeah.
Fascinating. I love that. That's interesting. Wow. I love that you just laid this out this way. I mean, I coach podcasters as well. It's amazing how many people think they're just so narrow-minded. I have to have X number of episodes so that I can quote monetize through my platform and I can get my 25-cent ad from Buzzsprout, and like that has nothing to do with it.
No,
That's just not where you want to be at all if you
no.
want to monetize and do this, for a living.
If
You
you have
gotta get
10
creative.
people, if you have 10 people listening to your episodes, you can monetize.
Yeah, it's what I tell folks every day. And this is a
Because
great way to go about doing that.
if your podcast is about uh, making candles with, I don't know, making candles that look like Jesus, there is a company out there that would like to advertise to people who are into this.
Right.
Like, and they'll be happy to pay you to get in front of those 10 people. Now, it's not going to be the same amount of money that John Lee Dumas gets with his 50,000 people that listen every day,
Right.
but it's going to be something. And as long as you are comfortable with where you've brought the show, then you can grow. Like, so what? You only made $100. Great. You actually made $100. Not that you only made 100. You made 100. That's
Made
cool.
$100, right?
Yeah. Now double your audience. See if you can double your money.
Exactly. No, that's awesome. Thank you for that story. You're right. That really was exciting to put down because I'll be able to reference this back to a lot of folks.
Yeah,
Um,
excellent.
that's great. Thank you for sharing that. All right. I always ask a corny question in the middle of this stuff. And with you, this might be really, really interesting. So, what is, as in terms of your podcast, what is the thing that you love the most about doing your podcast? And what is the thing that you hate the most about doing your podcast?
Oh, well, the thing that I love the most is finding the wow, that moment where I know it's going to be awesome. Finding out that uh who's the name of it? Who wrote the Star Spangled Banner?
Francis Scott Key.
Finding out that Francis Scott Key married a woman whose parents owned Frederick Douglass. I was like, what? That's a thing? How come nobody talks about this?
Is that a thing?
That's a thing.
That's a thing.
That's a thing.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. That is the moment my favorite. Like, what? And then I Google it and I'm like, does nobody else picked up on this? How is this not a thing?
I've never heard it before till now.
Yeah.
So
So that's my favorite when I find that out.
awesome. So the wow moment. Gotcha.
Yeah. Oh, my least favorite. Oh, my least favorite is spending so much time on an idea and then never finding it
Hmm.
and having to put the notebook back in the binder, like, oh, just so down when I get, because I can't put out an episode that doesn't have it. Can't put out an episode that's like, this is pretty good. I mean, the one red paperclip story is cool, but it's just not there. That moment. If the moment's not there, oh, what a downer.
Yeah, I can imagine, especially putting that kind of work. I mean, you work for a month to put these things together. So
And sometimes it
that's something.
takes 2 weeks to find it.
Right.
And you got to follow every rabbit trail. Like I thought Wikipedia should sponsor the podcast because I follow all the Wikipedia trails. I've actually thought that would be cool because, I learn a lot just by following. They just mentioned one guy's name. I follow every name. What'd that guy do? What'd that guy do? And eventually I'm like, whoa, what? That guy's this? Nobody's putting this together? And then, And then sometimes there's nothing. But yeah, the ones where there's nothing, oh, it's so disheartening.
Have you approached Wikipedia about that? Because I mean, yeah, that sounds like a perfect fit for like
Yeah,
a
I
main
haven't,
sponsor of the whole
I
thing.
haven't, but it's an idea. Yeah,
Wow. Well, good luck with that. That's going to be
yeah.
awesome for you. All right, Dan, I've kept you a long time, and you've shared a ton of information, man, and I really do appreciate you coming on and just sharing all this with the audience, um, because you've given more than a few tips on podcasting since you've been sitting here,
Oh,
and so
I'm an
people
open
have
book when it comes to that, man.
they've gotten a wealth of
You said all
information.
boats rise, you know? Like,
Absolutely, man.
unless you also believe that, it doesn't happen.
No, exactly. You can't just say it. You got to buy it.
Yeah.
Um, but I usually end with one question, and you've been around for a minute. You're at 62 episodes, counting the six missing ones, that are mysteriously gone, which I love. So, what piece of advice would you throw out there to a podcaster who just simply is not where you are yet?
Oh, I have the same piece of advice for everybody. If you wanted to start a podcast before you had the topic, you probably went about it the wrong way. Like, podcasting is a medium. It's not a thing. It's a delivery medium. Nobody wants to start a delivery medium. That's not a thing. And the idea that you want to start a podcast um, is just wrong. What you have to do is you have to find out, what do you have to say to the world? Like, and maybe if you don't know that, you gotta like think through your reputation, like at your office. Like, who are you? Are you the Excel guy? Everybody comes to you for Excel tips. I mean, are you in your neighborhood? Are you the indoor house plants lady? Everybody comes to you because you'll know why the green, the leaves are yellow. Like, what is it that you are? Like, look on your bookshelf. Like, what are your books? What do you buy? What do you read? What do you talk about? If your podcast is not about one of those things, then it's probably the wrong podcast. There's no reason to try to get millions of listeners to something that's not really you. The only thing that you bring to the table is you. That's the only thing you bring. You, your insights, your experiences, your voice,
Yeah.
your your take on the world. I mean, there's somebody else doing another podcast just like yours. Um, but the difference is you. So if you're not talking about something that is in you, like then you're not bringing your gift to the world. You're just doing something because everybody else is doing it, and that's probably why people aren't sensing it in the episodes. It's probably why people aren't sharing it. And then the second tip is, this is very hard to hear. I'll tell you, it's hard for me to hear. Is if your podcast isn't growing, it's your fault. That's the hard part to hear. And the reason is if you have 10 listeners and you don't have 11 in a couple of months, why aren't the 10 sharing it? What is it about it that the 10 aren't just naturally telling their friends? Like, what is it that you're doing? Why is it not share worthy? Like, you shouldn't have to do a lot of marketing. You should be putting together an amazing show. Like, I mean, I'm gonna go see the next Tom Cruise movie because I like Tom Cruise. If it's good, I'm gonna tell my dad because he likes action movies. I'm gonna tell him. I'm gonna have him go
Right.
watch it. That's just the way it is. If it's good, I'm gonna tell him to go see it. Um, I tell people all the time, the shows that I like, they should watch. So if people aren't telling everybody about your show, if it's not growing, as hard as it is to grasp, it's probably your fault. You probably gotta rethink. Okay, what would make this share worthy? Like, how could I make it better? And if you start there, like your show will grow. But if you keep thinking it's because you're not doing marketing, like your show is great, and the only reason it's growing is because you're not doing marketing, like that's the wrong way to go about it. If your show is great, you'll know it's great. People will share it. Um, Otherwise, marketing is just an activity. Like it's one person in your 10 has to tell someone, like one. So
Right.
you could have 11.
Yeah.
Um, and if that's not happening, then go back to your show. Like what? Like what should I add? What would make it share worthy? What would make it awesome? And then fix it. And then keep fixing it. And then worry about you're not doing marketing later.
Awesome. Beautiful. All right, Dan, people want to contact you and get more of this wisdom. You're on all the socials. You want to
I
tell
am.
everybody where to find you?
I'm a Dan R. Morris pretty much everywhere.
Okay.
Except Instagram. I'm not on Instagram. I'll tell you why I'm not on Instagram. Well, one, I just am not, I just don't do a lot of pictures. And then two, I started waking up in the morning while I was in bed. I would grab my phone, I would go to Instagram and I would watch these reels. What are the Instagram stories? I don't know, those little videos.
Okay.
Oh, and I would just keep watching them. I would just keep flipping through them, like boxing highlights, baseball, basketball, DIY, like for an hour, 45 minutes before I got out of bed. And I eventually was like, I got to get rid of Instagram. This is not a good habit. This is a bad habit.
So
So
it got you. Instagram
I
got
deleted
you.
it. Yeah, it
Okay.
was a bad habit.
All right. So Facebook, Twitter mostly, and mostly on Twitter, right?
Yeah, yeah, I love Twitter.
Okay.
I know it's got a new name, but it's still Twitter to me.
I got you. So Twitter/X for any of the newer folks who are trying to
Yeah,
make the change in their vernacular like I am.
or
But
Facebook.
and Facebook. Good deal. Awesome. Dan, thank you again for coming on, man.
Yeah,
I
man, this
just
is
really
great.
appreciate it.
Appreciate
It
it.
was absolutely wonderful having you on. It's been beautiful. I can't wait to hear the Santa Claus show. I really can't.
Oh yeah, dude. Oh, hey, here's the last.
Go ahead.
When is that going to come out? I guess it will come out in like November, but yeah, I'll get it to you.
Yeah, and this episode will be out long before November. So you'll be able to tell people about it.
Oh yeah, so if you're listening to this in 2029, it's already out.
There you go. And I have a lot of problems with my business if that happens. All right, brother. Thank you very much for everything. All
Yeah,
right,
dude.
folks. You've listened to yet another awesome podcaster on an awesome podcast, The Podcaster Nation. Folks, this is the podcast that's about podcasters. It's for podcasters and it's done by podcasters. This is the place where the rising tide raises all ships. So keep sailing.